I call this work session of the Luray Town Council to order. Will you please stand and join me for a moment of silence? Well, ask Councilman Shiro to lead us in our pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Danielle, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Doffmeyer?
Here.
Mr. Vickers?
Here.
Ms. Lillard?
Here.
Mr. Shiro?
Here.
Mr. Pettit?
Here.
Mr. Sowers?
Here.
Mr. Webb?
Here.
Okay, the first item, the Greenway Foundation, Yeager Spring Expansion. Mr. Dudley.
Oh, man, packet. Handouts. My goodness, that is nice. Pretty impressive. Poor Jordan.
Thank you.
One extra one.
On behalf of the foundation, we just want to again thank you for letting us come before you as we consider this journey together and a potential expansion of the Greenway. Giving you a little packet so you can follow along with us as we go through this. I want to give you a special, or I want to give a special shout out to our secretary, Gladys McNamara. Gladys has a tremendous administrative background, and she has put this together for us and donated all the materials, which we deeply appreciate. And again, I want to thank Rod Graves. Rod is just a valuable resource as we consider this expansion together. So, with no further ado, Gladys is going to give you a little overview of what we'd like you to hear.
Thank you, Bill. So just a very quick reference to the agenda, which is your first page in your packet. We have ceased using the term Phase 5 because it became apparent in the last month that there is confusion about Phase 5 because there are previous documents out there referring to Phase 5 and 6. And so we're now just calling this, at this time, the next phase is our request. And then as the other documents get resolved one way or the other, then this phase would get numbered. Does that sound agreeable? Just to make a note that we're looking at this as an expedition, as a journey, and we're going to walk through that by talking about what is the destination of that journey, of that expedition. And Rod will talk about that with all the history. The map will be discussed as far as the trail to get to the destination. Bill is going to review that. We need fuel for the expedition, right? So that's the funding. So Margaret and Ken will discuss that. Jim and I will discuss the journey itself, which is the action plan, which is the overview. And then we'll wrap it up and then open up for questions. And hopefully we'll have some answers. We did leave intentionally some white space on every page so that you can jot your notes for yourself and your questions so that the speaker can get through their presentation and stay on course and hopefully on time. And then we can address all those questions at the end. Thank you.
Thank you.
Rod Graves, Luray, Virginia. Thanks for having me again. Really exciting to be here. I want to thank Gladys for getting this, and real honor to be here with the Greenway Foundation. It's exciting. Back in 2004, I talked a little bit about this, and this is really has developed into something very special. The history and development of the industrial complex of what we know as Redwell Isabella Furnace was started in 1787, and I've given basically a short an earlier synopsis of the historic background of it. If you all will look on the third page, you'll see a map that I drew many years ago. And it's a crude map, but it does show everything that we know was there originally. This was my vision at the time, back in 2004, of what I wanted to do, or what I thought would be nice to do, with some revisions done just several weeks ago. Obviously, the greenway to get to the Jaeger Spring is very, very essential. I suggested that we use a historic-looking bridge that could go over it, and I'll get to that in just a minute, not to get ahead of myself. The site that you all own is very, very archaeologically sensitive. It's very historic. It's very ecological. There's incredible riparian resources there, worthy of study and enjoyment from the public to scientific study. You're really sitting on something very special there. And I think it could be significant if it's handled right. Back in 2004, we got, Joe Davis and I got it on the Redwell Isabella National Historic District designation. And that was really big, and unfortunately nothing happened after that, which was disappointing, but maybe the timing just wasn't right. And with the conduit of the Greenway and that incredible accomplishment that you all have had with the Greenway here in town, that could help be a facilitator for this future park. There's a lot of physical information there. They're already there. You all do own the building on, let's see, page, I guess, that's page 6, I guess. It talks about the historic district. That was the original office. There's the Spring House, which was built in 1785, as far as I know. And it has an addition built in 1960, which all is in pretty desperate need of repair right now, and security as well. But not past, any of the imagination of having it properly restored. And I've done a lot of that. Happy to lead that. Years ago, I helped restore the office building that you all own, and it says Redwell Furnace Office Building. That is very, very close to being really stabilized and ready to restore. And I do know that there's grants out there that Gladys and Ken, rather, will be talking about on that. So I hope we can, it's delicate for me to say because it's other people's property, but there are other historic resources there that belong to other parties that are adjacent, belong to the Phillips and the Smith families that were originally part of the Furnace plantation. When I say plantation, that's what they would call a place where everything was self-sufficient. And really through that self-sufficiency, a community was built, and then Luray happened shortly after that, developing it into its own community. I think we need a high priority having a National Historic District designation sign there, which is, we could get a state sign, and I think a plaque recognition on the office to start off with would be appropriate, just to get things, people to understand what was basically there. The gray signs would be available there. Those fundings are there. The Greenway phase and the covered bridge, I would like to, if you all to turn to that a little bit. This is just an idea I have. You all can see what the bridge, the first part of the bridge would be over the actual spring of Jaeger Spring. And I drew a facsimile of what it could look like. This is a walking bridge across there. And then the other larger bridge that would go across the creek would be something, something like this, that's on this page here. I think would be a real calling card for Luray, and I have talked to some engineers, and they think it could be done. It's just an idea, but I think that I'm in tourism, and I think that it could be really helpful for Luray's tourism. It's an incredible photo opportunity, people to get married there. There's incredible opportunities for this, and it would look historically appropriate to the objective of creating a historic park there at the furnace site. There's several different versions of what that could be. There were many historic covered bridges here in this county at one time that are no longer here, of course, that could be made to be very strong and modern and functional, but have a facsimile of what one would have looked like originally for aesthetic purposes. The resource of the spring, ecologically, if you look at the photograph of the spring, it's magnificent. I don't know if I've told any of you all, but every year we clean the wishing well. About 3 weeks later, this gets murky. So there's a connection karst-wise with this. It's important in a cave way. And, cave's obviously very important to me, but important to the community overall. And so there's a neat connection there physically with that probably. And to the purity to our water here too. There's a lot could be studied there. My wife and I just recently got down on a business trip to Florida. And we went to a place called Blue Spring Park, and we saw a sign that was down there and interpretive panels that talked about Blue Springs. Well, they're no different down there. It's the same thing. It's just on a much grander scale. We were an incredible almost 9 million gallons per day produced here, and they had 44 million gallons a day. But it all stems out of karst topography. Ours being limestone, theirs being a different karst down in Florida, of course. But that's a major park. This just shows you an idea of what could be talked about ecologically as well as historically, culturally. There's an immense talk about culturally down there on not just a historic way, but also with our cultural history of our county. Let's see where I am here. And if you'll see on one of the last pages, it talks about the blue hole karst. It is very interesting, and probably goes down about 40 feet. It's generally the way they are almost everywhere. If you'll jump back to the stack, this is what it would have looked like originally. Very similar. This is one of the first national parks in the country up in Massachusetts. But ours would have looked very similar to that. But I think one of the most exciting things in conclusion is that, like I said before, this gave birth to the town of Luray, basically. We would have been a wide spot in the road had it not been for this dirty industrial site that's now very beautiful and quaint and a huge resource for you all on so many different levels. I'm hoping you all will give it your highest consideration, and I'm here to help with whatever you need.
Thank you, Rod. Very
Any
nice
questions?
presentation. Thank you. Anybody have any questions for Rod?
Just curious, the karst, are they always staggered like that?
They are. They're like a
It's a slow outflow?
yeah. They're basically wells, and they're estuarial, underground wells basically, and that usually are karst related. And there's a lot to. I mean, there's so much to pump from there. I mean, if you just add the history, that'd be one thing, but you've got so many different layers of things to come from. It's good stuff. Well, thank you all. If you all have any questions, please, you all know how to get in touch with me. So, thanks.
Thank you, Rod.
Okay, our next little section there, if you'll flip over to where it says the Park Trail, we've got 3 GIS presentations. Jen Jenkins, our superintendent of Parks and Recs, was kind enough to go down there with us, and just to look to where you can see the greenway and where we think the trail would best be come off of. We do note that the town uses a ford there to get across to the other side to work in that riparian buffer that's on the west side of the creek. So we've got to stay away from that. And, as we get into a feasibility study down the road, hopefully this will become more concrete as far as exactly where we'd put it. But that just kind of gives you an idea of where we hope the trail would be with the bridge, and then moving on down to Jaeger Springs. Any questions on that one? And Margaret and Ken are now going to talk about the fuel for this expedition.
As you come up to speak, if your address has changed, please let us know. I think all of you have been with us before, so we don't need your address, unless it's changed, and I don't think it has. Ken, nice to have you.
Thank you. Funding. Part of our funding, the bricks and mortar portion, was from Department of Conservation and Recreation. Those are the people that build and maintain state parks. They gave us $65,000 for the first phase of the Greenway, then $93,000 for the second, and $100,000 for the other remaining phases. That's bricks and mortar. We had to save the invoices and go back through that. In effect, you have to earn your way through the grant. The other part from Virginia Department of Forestry is very unique. They can't give you a bunch of money, but they give you a lot of support in a lot of different ways. Almost all of the Greenway booklets, 30,000 of them, have been paid for by VDOF. They support CDAC, Community Design and Assistance Center, gives you free help. That planter right across the street was their design, but Paul Revel funds them. Paul Revel died a couple years ago of cancer, and that was a terrible loss. And how many of you have met Paul? Okay. There's something about him that you did not know, probably. Jean, my wife, and I met his widow at Harrisonburg a couple of years ago. And we hugged, we cried, we laughed. And he repeated the fact that he was so proud of Luray. He would, at every opportunity that he could, he would bring United States senatorial staffers here. He could have brought them someplace else in Virginia, but he wanted to show them what a small town could do with a bit of money. That's one of the most precious things I think we could ever say about the support that we have received. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Margaret, how are you this evening?
Great.
Do we have your address? We probably do. You want to give it to us again in case we don't? We probably have it.
Margaret Stevenson, 101 Pass Run Drive, Luray.
Thank you, Margaret.
That's in Hope Mills subdivision. On the potential funding sources, there's a page here. I'm sorry. There's a page here with the potential fundings. And just this week, we found out about an additional one. That's, the name of it is Save America's Treasures, and we fit right into that. The potential is $1/4 to $1/2 million. It is phenomenal. But we also have all of these, and I'm not going to read them to you because they're listed right there. So if you have any questions, if you'd please hold them to the end, we'll be glad to answer them. Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Margaret.
you to say things.
Okay.
Mr.
I will
Davis,
try.
Mr. Davis, have you moved? Do we have your address?
3 Jamison Road, Luray.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Mr. Mayor, members of council, thank you for letting me speak with you for a few minutes this evening. And I'm going to talk to you about what we've done so far on our action plan. But I get excited. I'm an excitable person, and I'm really excited that we have such a wonderful town council, a body of representatives for the citizens of Luray that are always looking for ways to uphold this municipality and lead it forward for the betterment of all, because all of us have to be in this, and the boat has to rise together. And I'm particularly excited about Redwell Isabella, which I have a picture on the wall up there, because it creates 3 or 4 orbits for good. We have the Blue Spring in that pond. That can be a real draw to folks. That can be a really exciting, entertaining, stimulating thing for people who aren't aware of it if we market it right. I don't know how many people are interested in the historical part of it. I'm nuts about it. I don't know how many people will be in the general public. But still, it's what industrialized America. If it weren't for iron, we'd have been nowhere. And if it weren't for Redwell Isabella, I know we've heard this several times, the town of Luray would have been, as Rod said, a wide spot in the road. And there are over 200 or 300 people employed there. And I want to tell you one thing that you might not be aware of that just excites me. But the South Fork of the Shenandoah River in 1810, 200 years ago, was dredged from Port Republic in Rockingham County down past Front Royal, Virginia. And there were 2 or 3 local boat manufacturers. They were called gondolas. It was a low-slung, flat-bottom boat, and it had a crew of 2 or 3 men. And they'd load agricultural products on. They'd load the pig iron on at Redwell. They probably loaded it on at Sandy Hook, which is about 3 miles north of Luray. And they'd float that pig iron down to Harper's Ferry. They'd sell the pig iron. They'd break the boat apart, sell the lumber, and walk back to Luray, Page County. That was standard operating procedure till the railroads came in the 1880s. When the Norfolk and Western came through in the 1880s, wasn't long before the boats died. But you could hear those horns. The boatman would blow his horn to let people know if there was a narrow point in the river, on and on. So that's just something we can tell. I just think it's interesting, and I think that people who are interested in history, and there are more than we probably know, if we could tell that story, that would be another draw. So we have history, we have nature, and then we have this beautiful scene, and I'm going to, as part of the end of my action plan talk, I'm going to invite all of us to come together because there's strength in group, to come down there together on a pretty day and view that scene. Because it's breathtaking. I've lived here my whole life, and I'm not telling you that because it makes that much difference, but it's one of the prettiest places in Luray. We have a real jewel, and if we market it right and we show it right, it will be a tremendous draw for people who haven't seen that sort of thing, who may not even know about that sort of thing. So, anyway, that's my private spiel to you all, and that wasn't on the agenda. Anyway, all right. So we have been through step 1. We have been Redwell site visit, board members Jen, Mayor Dolfmeyer. The drawings of the proposed Greenway route were part of that visit. Report foundings of the foundation board members. So we've done that. We are making our presentation to you folks this evening. And then number 4, I invite all of us sometime in March when the weather's good. Well, I should have put it there. I give up. Sometime in March when the weather's good, can we please all get together and go down there so we can see the beauty of it? And, you know, a picture's worth 1,000 words. And until you go and see it as a council, I don't think you can fully appreciate or begin to get more excited about what we have. It's a great and tremendous opportunity to again show Luray, and this is very unique. You don't have a spot like this within 300-400 miles. We have something we can really develop and be proud of, and will be a tremendous draw on the East Coast. You have the city of Baltimore, that's 1 million. You have the city of Washington, one of the most wealthy per capita places in the United States of America. It's the seat of government. We have a tremendous draw there. So we've got a real jewel on our hands, and I know we can do it together. We can make it a reality. I know I talked too long. I beg your pardon. Go ahead, Gladys.
Thank you, Mr. Davis.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, Jim.
Yeah.
I'm Gladys McNamara at 7 Hilltop Drive. Continuing down on the action plan there, as Jim was mentioning, we would like to go as a group, the council and the foundation, not only to see the beauty, but to have Rod give us a guided tour through the history versus just looking at it through the pictures and words. You'll note in the agenda, I did note that in March 13th, the time changes, so it gives us a little more daylight time that we could maybe get everyone's schedules together. The next step would then to be, and actually I think it's in process now, is to secure the buildings properly, because as this gets talked about more, and we just want to preserve the history there and not have any archaeological issues because of people tromping where they shouldn't and so forth and so forth. But at some point, definitely share it with everyone. So we've asked Jen to kind of lead that and to work with you all and what is the best way to secure those buildings. Redwell written history, Rod shared some of that now, but to summarize that so that it's ready for grant writing. Second page, we talk about a visit to Hopewell. Again, we'd like to coordinate that with council and foundation members. Hopewell is a sister furnace. It was the first furnace before Redwell of the, probably going to get these names wrong, Rod, I apologize, I believe it's Pennybacker. It's amazing the similarities between the two properties. And while I'd like to always be the leader and innovator, I think we have a lot of history as our greatest teacher. So I think going there and seeing their park would be of value to us in how we would go about our park, perhaps, the do's and the don'ts, perhaps. The rest of the action plan is really a three-part refrain. Raise the money, do the action, move to the next step. Raise the money, do the action, move to the next step. When we began this journey back in March with our discussions among the board, we were looking at the trail coming first and then the park. But as we're seeing this now develop further, these many months later, it could be that it needs to be one package, although it would be phased in, but to go after the grant monies is one package. And I say that because Margaret mentioned we just found the grants available through the National Recreation and Park Association, and that is called SAT, Save America's Treasures, and eventually we want to share America's treasures. But that grant closes, the application closes March 10th. Wasn't aware of that grant possibility for preservation of historic area and land until yesterday. So, but you know, it's there, and we're hoping that we can reach that consensus this evening to move forward for feasibility study and to look for those grants. The last part of the packet is just some photos of Hopewell that I took from their website. You'll see the similarities to the photos that Rod shared with you of our property, and you can see the very similar property arrangement and building style. And we envisioned having that education session on our Redwell furnace sometime in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you, Gladys. Anybody have any questions for Gladys? Do we have your address, Gladys?
7 Hilltop Drive.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you for your presentation.
So finally, and I apologize if we've taken too much of your time. We won't have to do this much again, hopefully. But what I think we would hope that council would maybe consider would be an estimate for a feasibility study from somebody like Racy to see how we would move forward. That would be an action item that we would hope might come about because we need that, okay? And finally, I just give to Councilman Vickers in particular asked us, we are your servants, your volunteers that want to do good. As far as just backtracking just a little bit, We went back and looked at Phase 5 and Phase 6 of the Greenway. We just recently received a feasibility study that was done by RACI a few weeks ago. The drawings, I think they have those.
Yes.
Yeah, y'all have the drawings. That would be the summary from RACI on this as another way to get the Greenway from the schools down to the creek and on. Linden Avenue would be difficult, if not as possible, not impossible, as costly to bring into ADA compliance. A trail to Big Springs requires property owners' permission. Property owners are not favorable as far as that concerns. ADA concerns. Y'all have that information. The foundation has not taken a position as far as giving up on trying to get the Greenway to Ralph Dean Park. If you guys want, you gentlemen and ladies want us to pursue that, we're here to serve you. But that was a piece of information that you may or may not have had another alternative way to get to up to the school. Questions? And again, I apologize for taking so much of your time.
So just to clarify, that study was done in 2019, and the report was sent to the town office in June of 2019. So if you want to look back through your files, you'll find the drawings and the report.
Right.
So, I guess Gladys or Bill, are you all trying to hit that March 10th deadline for the grant? I assume it's an annual grant, so if you don't get it this year, you get it next year. Are you trying to hit that?
I
Are you
don't.
giving up for this year because it's a timely?
No, we have not given up.
Try to get something in?
We're hoping with your permission to move forward with trying to secure that, one of those grants.
And,
Yes.
and two, I think we need y'all to tell us, again, we're good volunteers, do good. We don't want to get out in the weeds here. I mean, you've got to have staff involved and keep people, leading this charge. And we're just here to support you and do what we can on a volunteer basis.
But yes, to answer your question, we would like to apply this year, but we need your approval to do so.
What do you need from us to apply? You need a,
I mean, I guess, I don't know, you,
Staff would have to tell,
Feasibility
yeah.
study, feasibility study first, so that then we can get the application
well,
into wherever it goes by March the 10th.
Are you gonna need something, we say feasibility, just like an idea that Pat could put together, costs for the trail? and
Yes.
what-
And the historical interpretation, yes.
this particular grant, it says that it is supporting the planning as well as the bricks and mortar. So, to me, that, I'm not a grant person, Rod, help me here, but to me, that means that we could be applying to them for the money to do the feasibility study. It's part of the planning, and that's why I think we could meet that March 10th deadline.
so you're asking for an estimate of the study or the study? It's just an estimate of what the study would cost or
I-
the actual cost of the study?
I think we need again, Steve and Brian, y'all can comment as far as working with RACI. We're probably talking big bucks just to do a proposal as far as, what we would get into as far as trying to figure out the feasibility of building the trail and the historical interpretation. How would that work?
Mr. Mayor, if I could,
Please, Steve.
if council would give staff the opportunity to meet with some of the representatives of the foundation to read through the grant, to get an idea of what information needs to be submitted for a planning grant. And then I think if it is possible, we'd love to work with the foundation to make that application. It's just, I would not want council to make any commitment right now without knowing exactly what needs to be submitted with that application. And just hearing the, again, staff had been under the understanding that this would be a phased effort of put the trail in, and then we'd look at the scope of what the park, the end facility would be. Hearing that it would need to be a package for some of these grant opportunities. I think we also would want to sit down with the foundation to get an idea, at least conceptually, of what the scope of this terminus would be, so that part of your discussion tonight is Ms. Jenkins talking about the needs of her staff. If we're talking about a trail extension and then another park at the extent, I think that will compound her issues. But again, I think we want to work with the foundation, and I think it's just, if council would say absolutely, if staff can work with y'all to meet that 10 March deadline, we'd love to do that. Right now, I don't know what the extent of what that grant needs to get submitted.
Right. And I think a phased-in approach, I mean, if we build a trail, we want it to go there and have something for folks. It may start out with picnic tables and historic and interpretive type signs and this kind of thing. I mean, all that needs to be planned and designed.
Council, anybody have thoughts?
I think Steve's idea is a logical approach. I think we authorize the staff to work with the foundation and get an idea of the scope of the grant and what's involved in the application process and what kind of materials are going to be submitted, and if there are costs associated with that, then identify those costs as well. But I think that's a good approach.
When do you think when do we get a number like what they project the trail would cost? See, that's, eventually we've got to get some numbers.
Well,
That's probably part of the grant.
Well, I think if need be, we can use historic costs as far as what the bridge was, what the trail construction was, to get a ballpark of what it would take for the trail extension.
Good.
And then talking with y'all about in concept, what the facilities would be for the Roswell Isabel Park, if you want. We could then, I think if we could get together in the next couple of days to talk with y'all about the extent of the facilities, I think in-house and with Racy's assistance, we could come up with a conceptual cost for both the design as well as an estimate of the construction. And I'm hoping that is sufficient, that the grant would want, as far as coming up with a ballpark of what the conceptual cost of the grant would be.
Wonderful.
Thank you for that opportunity. We will.
Thank you all so much.
Council, any other comments, thoughts?
I got a question.
Yes, sir, Rob.
I can't wrap my head around how you can protect that blue spring. I mean, I understand you can lock buildings up and whatnot. I've always thought the more people show up at things, the more trash they drop. How do you go about doing that?
Well, I mean, there's lots of, yes, is that right? Sure. There's lots of parks like that. I just went to one in Florida. I went to two of them just like that. There was Blue Spring parks down there. There's other furnace parks in the country.
But do you need to have people there to supervise?
Not necessarily. I think there's some security measures that can be advised, for that that are low cost ways to do that. But I do think that it's consideration what you're talking about. I mean, it does need preservation, but not being hidden is not going to help the town out.
Oh, I agree with you, but I was wondering about how you do it.
It's like Jim said, it's an absolute treasure you've all got here, and to not develop it in some way, at least I'm for the slow approach, like Jerry said, and the town manager. I think that should be good, but I'd really hate for you all to miss a good grant round too while the iron's hot, so to speak, too, because it's a very exciting project.
I'm not familiar with Blue Spring. I designed the improvements for Wall Springs Park in Pinellas County, Florida, and it was a similar facility. What we wound up doing is putting an elevated, not a wall, but effectively informational kiosks that were connected around the circumference of the spring to reduce people's access, not visually, but physically. So there are a number of opportunities, and I think one of them is one that Ms. Jenkins is going to be talking about is funding for video cameras to record that, so that, and then a link to the police department and to the parks department, so that while we may not be there physically, we have the ability to monitor remotely.
And fencing too is one thing that you can do to mitigate problems, you could have period fencing out there that
Okay.
could mitigate that. And also, one thought that came to mind is that once the bridge is across, on the creek side anyway, that could be a quarantine at night through that bridge, because that's you're going to be only access there, other than coming to Yeager's Road. So that's a good idea. I think you could have just a gate on the bridge that closes at night, and it's just a matter of doing that.
That helps, yeah.
Thought
Thank you.
anyway.
Council, anybody else?
I just want to thank the foundation. It's a lot of work. Thank you very much. Very,
Incredible.
very well presented. Thank you.
Thank you all. I did have just one question. So, going forward, you don't feel like we're slowing down anything for this grant round? You're good? You feel good about it? Make sure everyone's on the same page. That's what I understood.
Yeah, we're excited about your opportunity to meet with you.
Thank you so much.
Anybody else? Thank you all again for being
Thank
here
you all.
tonight.
It's
Thank
great.
you.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. Burke?
Yes, sir. More of an informational item for council. The Living Legacy has put in a formal request for council to proceed with consideration of the donation of parcel 42A3-A-47A, located near the property for the West Luray Rec Center. We have started working with the town attorney, and I believe that we are working with Racy Engineering to get the required survey plat of that updated. So we believe that we should be ready for a public hearing at your April meeting. The Legacy had inquired if we might be able to make it at the March, and just due to the fact that we need a survey, if that won't happen. So we will be shooting to have this at your April meeting, where council would formally consider donation of that lot.
So we have to have a public hearing to donate property? Is that why we're having a public hearing? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Council, I think we've talked about this before. Any comments on this? Anybody?
No problem.
I think it's
Not really a usable piece of property other than for them. I mean, as
Oh,
far as
yeah.
the line of entrance, it's not something that can really be developed.
Don't we have an easement or two across it, Steve?
Well, that's part of what the survey
Oh,
would be.
okay.
There are some town facilities within that property that would need an easement when we donated it. But we aren't currently using it, and if the Legacy and the rec center would be able to incorporate that into their facility, I think it is a worthy consideration by council.
Right, any other comments on that? Anybody? Thoughts? All right, Mr. Burke?
Yes, sir. The town has received a request from the Stanley Fire Department for them to conduct their trout fishing tournament along the Hawksbill Creek on Saturday, May 7th. Council had previously supported this activity by an outside agency in the town limits because they had partnered with the the Fraternal Order of Police. They are now working with the Luray Boy Scout troops, Boy Scout Troop 100. We simply wanted to give the fire department an opportunity to come talk with you all about what they're looking to do, as well as see if council had any concerns about the change in their partnership.
Good evening.
Good evening, how are you, sir?
Just make it short. The reason, past 2 years we have used FOP. First year was Charlie. Fortunately, Charlie's passed away. Last year we still had one member that was working with the Luray PD. At this time, he's no longer with the Luray PD. We have asked around to several different deputies, town cop stuff. Nobody knows if the FOP even no longer exists. So we had a meeting at our station, and we was trying to think of another nonprofit organization in the town of Luray. And we come up with, I always knew Dow was part of Boy Scouts. So we said, all right, let's call Dow and see if they're interested. So 2 weeks ago, I met with them. We explained to them that we think this is great for the kids, hands-on stocking trout, starting, asking for donations at businesses and everything. And I received a phone call back from Dow that night after the Committee had their meeting, they was on board 100%. Our treasurer at the station had broke it down for us. Last year, we took in almost $21,000. Total expense was almost 10.5. And what we done a 60-40 split with the FOP because we had to actually come to Luray and cover all the Luray businesses. Nobody from FOP took care of them, so we had to all come down here and do all the businesses. We take care of everything all the way to Stanton, business-wise, restaurants. So for what we give the FOP, their part, and then we voted every year to give $1,000 to the FOP for the Shop for Hero, for Walmart and everything. They got right at $4,000 out of it. So that's kind of the same deal. We want to work with the Boy Scouts, if y'all agree. It is scheduled for March the 7th. Do y'all have any, I'm sorry, May 7th. Everything else has stayed the same. Do y'all have any questions?
I like it.
And I'd like to mention too that, Steve introduced, when you came up, what we were speaking of, we talked about an outside agency. I think what we can't forget either is that, you're partnering with a local group as far as the fundraising.
Yes.
But when we also talk about Stanley Fire Department, we can't forget that when Luray is tied up or has a major structure fire or something, we're calling on these guys to come fill our quarters.
We all here for the same reason.
Exactly. So it's the term outside agencies used, but we all work together. Luray helping you guys, you helping Luray, and we appreciate it.
Last year, I think we had people from 13 different counties, all the way from, we had 3 or 4 law enforcement agents, or personnel, Virginia Beach, come up here for 6 hours of trout fishing.
They catch a lot of fish?
I don't know what they call it. I know the truck tag was caught 2 days later. There was one for sure, maybe 2 money fish that was caught that day, but they did not know it until the following day. They went to clean them. They seen the tags.
Oh.
But we have already partnered up with Keith Auto again. We give them if it passed, 2016 Chevy Silverado 1500, 60,000 original miles. Tag fish, it's your truck.
Wow.
And then instead of doing 5 250, 2 150, we're going to span it out and give more people opportunity to catch. We're going to do 10 $100 tags. So, any more
I think I ask
questions?
you this every year. You have approached the Luray Fire Department about maybe the concessions. And maybe
We talked to them.
No.
We talked to Ryan Gatt and all of them. They're not interested.
They've got a lot going on.
They're not interested. So, any more questions?
No, I think it's a good effort.
Not only are we making money, the town, as far as meals, fuel.
We can't vote on it.
No.
We'll vote on it in March.
Right.
I hear nothing but good about it.
Yeah.
Good.
Everybody enjoys it. Yeah.
Businesses benefit from it.
Yeah.
Everybody benefits.
All right.
If y'all are making money, that's a pretty good chunk
Got
for one
to.
day, isn't it?
If it's day and time, you got to make
Loves
money.
every day.
Nothing's getting cheaper for sure.
That's for sure.
Well,
Thank you for being
Thank
here.
you.
Thanks much.
All right, Mr. Burke, the Lake Arrowhead Park issues.
Yes, sir. Previous discussions had been with Ms. Jenkins about some of the issues that we're experiencing at Lake Arrowhead, and we'd like to give her the opportunity to talk with y'all about problems that they've been experiencing, the plan that she and her staff have come up with, along with working with Chief Cook, and how we'd like to proceed, if y'all are all right with that.
Good evening.
Good evening, Jim.
So before I start, I would like to give you some copies of our RAC cards. So we appreciate everyone's patience as we work through the 2022 events calendar. We do our best to partner with a lot of our other local organizations to get their events listed on there as well. So we wanted to make sure it was as correct as it could be before we sent those to print. So this is our sporting events rat card as well. We don't typically print those, although we will post them online. So we will have the official laminated copies of the event rat cards for you soon. But before that got released, I wanted to make sure that you got your hands on it first. And second, I would like to just take a second and give you a brief update on the Imagination Station. We're quickly approaching build time. It's getting really exciting. I know it's a project that a lot of people have looked forward to. It's kind of been on the plans for a couple years, so we're really happy to see this come to fruition. This week, staff completed the removal of the FIBAR and the filter fabric and the gravel underneath. We worked with the contractor. They have removed all of the structure. They're finishing on pulling that from the site, but it is off of the build area. So we're currently hauling in fill dirt to bring the site up to grade. So it's been quite a process. We really didn't know what we were going to get into until we started digging. But staff they've worked really hard on that, and they've done a great job. So construction is actually scheduled to begin Monday, March 14th. So we're right around the corner. They anticipate, if the weather holds, a 2-week build. So we could be looking at a new playground structure the 1st of April, which is really exciting. But I don't want to shoot myself in the foot, so I won't talk about that, strict timeline, but we'll keep our fingers crossed. And I just wanted to mention that in the near future, we'll be presenting to council some additional items for consideration for funding. The $375,000 will cover the removal, the demolition, the site preparation, and installation of the new facility. But there's a few items that we would like to request to be considered for potential ARPA funding items to help complete the project. And some of those include the fencing and landscape barrier project, maybe some speed bumps, removable speed bumps to put on that first driving lane as you come into the entrance to the parking lot to slow traffic there, where children may be coming in and off, out from the parking lot to the playground or vice versa. We're reaching out to Allrec to get prices on some benches and some trash cans. We talked about adding some additional seating for parents as well. We're pursuing price estimates on an arched playground entry sign, something that you could walk under that would be exciting to see from the road, and replace the weathered sign. We are working to reclaim some materials for a memorial bench, so that's our hope is, and one of the things we plan to do is to use that sign to create a bench back. So we'll see how that comes about. And then also, one of the non-winning proposals had a canopy structure built in, which was really appealing to think about having some shade. So when we removed the other structure, we realized that we have 5 adjacent picnic tables that were not easily accessed before, but now can be incorporated into the new playground system just by incorporating a few canopies, and if we wanted to expand the FIBAR. So we're pursuing those options. We'd like we kind of feel like the inclusion of these would help improve public safety and user experience. So we hope to have those estimates to you in the next couple of weeks so that you can take a look at that and maybe consider those as part of the ARPA funding. So I'll move on to Lake Arrowhead Park issues, and I'm definitely not going to beat a dead horse. I think we had a good discussion in a previous work session about some of the issues that we've been having. And we met with staff and administration and kind of looked at what our top issues were, our top concerns, and then how to address those, because obviously we want to have solutions and not just spend our time complaining about things that aren't working. So some of the top concerns that we discussed were basically park overcrowding. There's been a huge shift in park usage the past, ever since COVID, which we like folks to use our parks, but in the case of Lake Arrowhead, we're seeing some overcrowding issues. Also, just some security and park monitoring concerns that we've had. Overall, I think we've done our best, but essentially we have sort of insufficient weekend staffing there on our highest days. We're failing to find either part-time staff or full-time staff, after they work 60 hours a week marking ball fields and doing events. It's really hard. They're getting kind of burnt out. So, and then basically just misuse and abuse of the facilities. So we have some proposed action items, so to speak, to address some of these, including developing potential max beach capacity. And that really is based on safety. Technically, when you have, for every 50 people in the water, you have to have 2 lifeguards on the stand. So with seasonal staff being restricted to 29 hours, we hire as many lifeguards as we can so that we can keep the beach open and run appropriate shifts and appropriate lifeguard staffing. But so if on a weekend we have 4 lifeguards, 2 are on the stand, 1 cannot leave the cash register, and the other is typically handling boat rentals and other things, it reaches a point where we do not have enough staff to safely monitor it. So while the beach area may, it may support larger crowds, I don't think safety-wise we have enough eyes out there to keep an eye on things. So we just crunched some numbers about usage rates in last year. Obviously, the top 2 days were July 4th and July 5th, where we saw 352 beach admissions and 331 beach admissions. So there were 8 days in which beach admissions were over 200 people, 7 days in which they were over 250. So obviously we don't want to inconvenience our park visitors. However, we want a safe environment and one that's enjoyable. So we would like to pursue looking into, maybe a maximum beach daily admissions, maybe 200, 250, depending on those levels. We're also thinking about monitoring if we can get staff there on the weekends, monitoring parking availability, and shelter rentals. And when we kind of feel like there's no more parking, the shelters are full, and the park has really reached full capacity, that we could post a simple park full sign outside to maybe deter further overcrowding. Our intent is not to close the park, obviously, and there's lots of other open space. However, on these busy weekends, people continue to come in, and it creates an issue where there's no parking, so they take advantage of our common areas, which is not safe for park visitors. We would like to delineate our parking areas using proper signage, maybe unauthorized vehicles beyond this point, not parking on the grass, removable delineators, landscaping, large rocks, whatever would be most aesthetically pleasing to keep people parked where they need to park. And we would like to also propose an increase in shelter rental rates for non-county residents. Not only would that help increase revenue a little bit, but I think it would help serve our county residents better. And I have presented that to Steve in my budget request, so you'll probably see that documentation pretty soon.
Are most of the shelters rented on the weekend?
Yes.
Just about every weekend, all of them?
Yes, sir. Yes. We are at maximum capacity with that. And even the ones that are not for rent, like the individual picnic tables with the covered shelters, those are usually full. We've had issues with when there's no shelters, then people bring in their own canopies and they set up their own tables and their grills, and it's just getting, that reaches the point where, people are abusing and misusing our facilities.
We probably have those figures, but what are those shelter rentals?
So for the large shelters, that's $45 a day. The medium shelters are $40, and the small are $35.
What about, we talked a little bit about the idea of maybe on the real high peak weekends, charging, I'd said out of county, because I think it'd be easy just to identify, setting up something where we, at least if we're gonna have, because I've been down there, I think it was last Memorial Day, it always said it looked like King's Dominion. I was really shocked.
I agree.
And I think a lot of people, I didn't recognize anybody.
Yes, yeah.
So would it be I'm not saying all the time, but maybe on those peak weekends where if we did just say $10 a carload.
Yeah, and I've actually addressed that.
Okay.
So if you don't mind, I'll go through
Yeah.
the rest of kind of what our proposal is, and then maybe we can talk about those thoughts as well. To address security and park monitoring issues, we've requested in this year's budget and also for ARPA funding, installation of a security camera system, one that would be integrated with PD's other systems. You can monitor that remotely. PD would have access on their phone. We would have access also from the phone and probably the desktop. And while that's not a physical person there, that is an instant look into an issue that may be going on. And then also just appropriate staffing levels and appropriate staffing authority. Our folks are usually the first line of defense and make the first contact when people are obeying park rules. But occasionally things get a little out of hand, and then we rely on PD to come in and deal with those situations. Ultimately, and I think we've talked about many options too, but even a part-time seasonal law enforcement officer for Saturdays or Sundays and holiday weekends, it's not a bad idea, when it comes to proper enforcement of rules and regulations. Essentially, we've made an effort last year to hire dedicated weekend seasonal park staff to help monitor. Unfortunately, that individual had a change in his shift for his full-time job, and he had to leave us early in the season. It was really nice to have someone there on the weekends, just as a floater. Myself and Morgan usually alternate weekends for beach coverage as well, but we don't get a weekend between April and November, and I know that's part of what comes with the job, but staff burnout tends to be a real issue by the end of the season. Excuse me. I don't have a real good answer to that, other than we will try to find another seasonal part-time employee that would be interested in covering our weekend park shifts, just to be a person there to answer questions and deal with issues before they were rooted in, so to speak. If people weren't parking where they were supposed to be, they could make an early attempt at taking care of that. And then just basically misuse and abuse of facilities. We need to update our park signage. We've added to it as the years have gone on, but we really need to revamp that. We need to have some bilingual signs, potential use of a QR code on those that would link to various other languages and interpretations. So we're looking into what those cost estimates would be. And then we've also talked to PD about implementation of fines. We'd have to post appropriately on the signs that fines could be given for various violations. But we would need to rely on PD for enforcement of that. And, as we all well know, that Bo's kind of short-staffed, particularly on the weekends maybe as well too, and getting them up there for quick responses can be challenging. So, but those are all the things that we've thought would be a good basis as to let's just correct and address the things that we know are very simple and basic at this point that maybe haven't worked the best. Now, I had heard that council was interested in pursuing the discussion about having a user fee of some sort like that. I don't know the logistics of that. Could be a little bit challenging. My preference would be, if we were to pursue that it would be something that could be purchased online, as opposed to having staff. The main entry road to the lake is a state-owned road, and so I am not sure if us charging for a fee or setting up a structure at that location would be allowed. In addition, with busy park weekends, we would have quick backup into that intersection, and it's a little difficult getting in and out of that as is. So we would need to think about how to implement that without adding a burden to on-site staff. If, you know, if it's something that could be purchased, that would be great. I don't know what sort of public message would have to go out so that people didn't show up without a pass, or, you know, so there's a lot of discussion that would have to go into that. My preference would be for us to try to address some of these basic issues first and maybe see if we had success with that this year, maybe work on continuing that discussion of whether we wanted to implement that. Of course, that's up to council. If that's something that you want us to pursue for this year, then, you know, we could certainly give you a list of concerns and that we had and what we think would work and what wouldn't work, and we can work through that.
Jen, did you give any thought to increasing the prices, not just for county, but or for people within the county that aren't in the town limits? Because if it's any online registration, you'll know whether they're in town or not. So.
Yeah, not really. You know, I grew up in Stanley, so and even there, not being from the town of Luray, I always appreciated the lake, and so I think we have a lot of other county residents that enjoy that as well. And so I don't want to inconvenience our county
And I can
residents.
appreciate that. Of course, they don't pay to the town of Luray taxes.
Yes, I know.
I'm
I
sure they do
realize
enjoy
that.
it, and
Yeah.
I don't want to inconvenience them either, but
Yeah.
it's our town taxpayers. that
Sure,
are paying for
I
that.
absolutely understand
And
that.
there's no, in my view, there's no difference between the county resident here and
Mhm.
Rockingham County resident. No, they're
True.
neither are paying
True.
anything towards the operations. It's kind of a catch-22.
It is.
Because you're, you know, at the same time saying we don't want to be burdened with collecting the user fees, but on the other hand, you're asking for additional staffing and everything else that the town taxpayers are going to pay for.
Mhm.
So I think there has to be some adjustment here somehow. I mean,
Sure.
fortunately, we've created a very desirable location there, and
Yeah.
we're going to have to figure out how to continue to fund that in an equitable way
Sure.
for our taxpayers, I
Yeah.
think.
Well, if it would be council's suggestion that we increase the shelter rental rates for, you know, other residents, other non-town residents, then that's fine.
And
We
I
can
think we
certainly
really
do
need to
that.
look at a way to assess some sort of user fee for it.
Mhm.
I really do.
For the park itself, not
The
just
park
for
itself,
the
yeah,
beach.
because it's the only fair way of doing it.
Mhm.
It's grown to the point that it's about inevitable. This couldn't sustain, and with us not having the revenue or ability to fund these requests, I mean, help it be somewhat self-sufficient.
Yeah.
And,
Sure, and some of the details, yeah,
support all of that.
that we would need to work through would be, you know, does your pass, is that a season pass? Is it a daily pass? Is it for vehicles? Is it for individuals? Does it cover your beach pass? What about folks who have paid for shelter reservations that are, you know, are they then have to pay to get into the park after they paid for their shelter reservation? If it includes the beach pass and we put maximum capacities on the beach for safety purposes, what about if you get in and then it's full? You know, so those are just some of the logistical things that we would like some guidance on.
Saying-
Yeah, yeah.
I'm just saying it's going.
Sure.
It's going to be that, or you know, we're going to just have to restrict access to the park because we can't keep on. In my opinion, we can't keep on taxing the Luray residents for this amenity
Mhm.
that so many people outside of Luray are using and enjoying,
Yes.
to the detriment of actually
I-
our residents. So-
I agree. I agree.
Yeah, I have a question. Sounds like there's more and more need for keep people in line. Has there been any arrests last year at the park? How bad does it get?
Not that I know of. We've had several issues that we needed to call PD on. One happened on July 4th. We actually ended up calling them twice. Just
You had
issues.
to evict people from the park at one time? Okay. That tells me you need more people there for the amount of people coming in.
And it's difficult too when our beach is staffed by our high school students primarily. That's difficult, and I can say that for two reasons. Number one, I was a teenager that managed a recreation area and had to deal with those difficult situations, and number two, I have a teenage daughter. So I often envision would I want my child approaching a potentially unruly park visitor, you know, in a remote location, even though there could be 100 people around. I think we are all in agreement over the past couple of years, the park has just developed a reputation to be an area where you could come for free and not really be supervised. And so, you know, our ultimate goal is to reset that so that it is a safe and enjoyable experience for people to have. And what that answer is, you're correct, it's not going to be easy, whatever that is. And we're willing to do, you know, work with you, take your suggestions and make it work. And I appreciate the fact that you're giving me the opportunity to talk about the areas in which we're now struggling a little bit, because we will need assistance with that. But ultimately, I think if we keep our eye on what the goal is, we will get there.
Jen, I thank you for bringing this to our attention and for the time tonight to have this discussion. Steve, with the development of the new website, is there an opportunity for there to be a widget or a tool for, you know, user fee to be added on there where our folks could go in and pay and access a pass? In lieu of having a station at the entry, as to what Jen is saying, you know, could we have that online?
Well, issuing a town pass to town residents isn't the issue. The bigger problem that we've talked with Jennifer is not everybody that's going to go into the park will pay for it online.
Oh, I understand. Right.
Then, how do we do collection? How do we do checking of passes? If we did that, and if there was a collection of a fee in cash, our preference would be that it would need to be someone most likely with some kind of law enforcement credentialing, just because we would not want our typical park attendants responsible for potentially hundreds of dollars in an unsecured location.
Right, which is why I'm asking if it could be an online option, a know before you go, right? I mean, that's going to be on us to get that communication piece out to the public. If you're coming to visit this park, I mean, DWR, as I had used this as an example earlier, last year when they tried to do with the public boat ramps and that you had to have that user fee on the river, now that legislation was squashed, and I think it was brought back up this year, but I don't know that it's went anywhere. But the onus was on the user, and you may or may not get stopped on the river, but if you do, you know, that's the importance of having your phone. You could pull it right up, show the officer or the agent, and we're good to go. Yes, that does come back to, again, being somewhat cumbersome or laborious to, you know, the staff, right? We'd have to have, I mean, what good does it do if we're not going to have someone there to do enforcement? But the same could be argued for these signs, right? I mean, there has to be somebody there doing some type of enforcement. So we still have to continue that discussion about labor issue. But I'm thinking about from the user, you know, the fees.
Well, and I think in discussion with the chief and Jennifer and her staff, as far as controlling the amount of people within the park, I think one of the best ways that we can do that is by limiting where people can park. And once the park is full, letting them know you can't park here. That will most likely, well, that will reduce the number of people that can come and visit the park. It's much easier for us to visually see someone that has a car that's parked out in the grass where it shouldn't be, someone who has put up a canopy in the grass where it shouldn't be. That's very easy for Jen and her staff to then, you know, go up and say, you can't be here. If they leave, that's great. If they don't, then we involve the PD, and then it makes it, that much more, enforcement is much more simple.
Right, yeah, I don't argue that. I think I was also trying to, my point being is that, yes, it would help with capacity, but also that it would be potentially a revenue generator. What amount, I don't know, but,
And again, I think, I don't have a problem if we look at what our rates are, and we have an in-town and an out-of-town rate for use of the beach, use of shelter rentals. And I think, my personal opinion is that if you aren't able to set up your own pavilion, then that will deter a number of people that we've had visit the park from coming. So I think that's part of what we're hoping to convey to council is that we definitely understand the desire to seek revenue from non-town users. Our hope would be that by implementing some of the things that Jennifer has proposed, that will allow us to reduce the number of out-of-town users that are visiting. If they're having to pay for an additional fee, they may look to a different location. If they get to the park and there's no parking and they can't do what they did in the past, they may look to a different facility. From what we're looking at an upfront expense for the signage, and that will hopefully give us a better ability to convey what the rules within the park are. I guess where we're coming from is, we understand council's desire for the potential for a fee to enter the park. We're hoping that if you give us a year to put these together, to let Jennifer continue to monitor what is going on there, it may be that we have reached the point that regardless of what we do as far as rules and parking control, people may, in the words of Bill Dudley, we've been found and people will continue to come. And if that is the case, then I think we'll be here next year saying, okay, you do have to look at putting in a fee to help further control the visitation and to help us recover costs to control the park.
I think, I'll admit, I'm not up there on the weekends during the summer, and I had, and again, thank you, Jennifer, for bringing this to our attention. I had no idea it escalated like that up there. I really had no idea. I guess aside from the cost standpoint, it sounds to me the situation that is being described is an accident waiting to happen with the kids trying to enforce these things and the number of people there. I'm just about gotten to the point where I'm just about concerned about the safety of, number one, our employees and our staff and visitors as the money. So I don't know, putting it off a year is going to be another summer. And
again, we're not saying that we're putting everything off and just going what we did last year. I do think that Jennifer has put together a good plan to, again, she's got the first-hand experience of the main problems that we've been experiencing. And our belief is that by controlling parking, by limiting the total number of visitors to the beach, by turning people away, that will allow her staff to better control the situations in the park by limiting the number of facilities where people can congregate. Again, that should allow her staff to better control some of the experiences that we've had in the park. And by no means, I don't want to convey, and I don't think Jennifer or the chief wants to convey that every Saturday or Sunday, if you're from town, don't go to the park. It's a free-for-all. It's not that I don't want to convey that to you all at all. We have had issues.
what kind of issue? I mean, have people just been, has anyone gotten physical with any of the staff or anything like that?
We had the incident last July 4th. There was no physicality, but it had escalated very quickly. Yeah, it was.
And I guess that's what concerns me. I mean, we have people trying to enforce the regulations there that are number one, they're not trained to do that. And then if you mix in alcohol and it gets to be, I mean, it can escalate really quickly to someone getting hurt.
Yes, sir. I think the majority of the issues that we've experienced are more, it inconveniences the park experience of those that are visiting. Overcrowding, noise, the potential for some difficult people. But that's not an everyday experience. But the overcrowding, the people setting up where they want to be, that I think is diminishing the experience of those that want to visit Lake Erie. And I think that's primarily what we're trying to allow Jen and her staff to better control. Personally, I think it is more a matter of the park experience that has been affected by the visitation, rather than, I don't think there's a question of public safety at the park. I think it still is a very safe place for both our staff and visitors. We've had a few incidents, but I don't think that's the norm. I think that is more the one individual, I think he was from out of state. And that one incident, I don't want that to be the focus of where we're at. I think what we're trying to do is to convey that it is a very popular park. That popularity diminishes the overall experience that our visitors have to the park. And I think that by allowing Jennifer to implement some of these programs will hopefully allow us to report back next year that, yes, we have restored the park experience to the point that we feel that people will be happy with their visits to Lake Erie.
Steve, it makes sense to me. You're gonna have to put up signs saying no canopies in the grass before you ever expect to have people go tell them you can't do this. Otherwise, you just set up an argument. So I'm all in agreement.
Exactly. I mean, we may continue to pursue a pass. Irregardless, I really think we need to have the items that I talked about in place, irregardless of that. You know, so that's.
But we will talk with Standout Arts about how we can incorporate an online payment for a park pass, you know, a daily or a weekend pass. So we hope to report that back to you as well.
I think something you'll see too, as far as rules and people following rules and behaving like they should, regardless of what the fee amount is, or whatever. If we're gonna have to, when we get to the point that when you go into that park, you actually go through some type of entrance station and have contact with someone as you go in, and you know that you're going to be seen coming out. What I get with it, I mean, that shows control, that shows there's rules. The way the park is now, you drive in as you please, you leave as you please. If you drive out to get, you know, more beer or something, you know what I'm saying? It's inviting a lot of the type of recreation, let's call it, because it feels uncontrolled. Some type of entrance, and as far as checkpoint entrance thing, also that control of when the park is full, you know, it's gonna need a turnaround. And you mentioned a good point, which is exactly right, with coming off of that road, this entry type point is gonna have to be further down into the park for stuff to stack, also gonna need a turnaround for someone that comes there with good intentions, but it's like, well, I don't wanna pay.
Sure.
Otherwise it's free, they gotta be able to turn around and, you know, get back out. But anyway, I think the feeling you get of just going in and out of that as you please, and really never have contact with staff unless you get down to the beach area or something like that, you're gonna be, it's just wide open. It's like your own backyard with no regulation, really no enforcement of any kind to a degree. I mean, unless something serious, you know, comes up, that it's just, we're sending that message. Do as you please. There's no checks or anything with it. So, you know, that, I think, and primarily weekends. Doesn't mean that if there's a check station or something you have to go through, that has to be manned whenever the park's open. But certainly on the Friday or Saturday, Sundays, or a holiday Monday or that type of thing, that everybody going in is face to face with somebody, and they've got to also see them coming out, and that does wonders, I believe.
I do believe that Jennifer's video camera system would include cameras that would catch you coming in and coming out so that we could get license plates, so that if there is.
But that's
an incident.
reactionary too. I mean, I think that's a good thing, don't get me wrong, but that, some people might not even know they're there. They still do their, whatever it is that upsets fellow users or whatever, and yes, we get a tag and you know, we maybe follow up, but it didn't prevent it from, it's reactionary instead of preventing. And I'd like to see us go more on the preventive side. I think we'll see better results.
Any idea how much those automated gate systems when you go into a parking garage would cost? I mean, I'd be interested to know what that would run. It doesn't have as much level of accountability unless it's really obvious there's a camera right there. But yeah, that way, just do it every day. Send out a little thing in the water bills or something, and every town person can just stick the card in there and go right on in and out. Just a thought, something like that.
Just scan a code on the car.
Oh, yeah. Do what?
Until they run through it.
Until they run through it or brakes, make bumps is usually what happens.
Yeah, connectivity.
Buzzkill back there.
Yeah. Connectivity is a significant issue up there. Most people do not have cellular service. So I guess whatever system we would use, if it would be electronic or if it could be a pay when you get here type thing, that there may be, you know, we would maybe need to look into what would need to be done to, well, I mean, we can't put up a cellular tower, so I'm just not sure.
You said it can't go right at the end of the road, so.
It's not really a controlled space.
Yeah, I agree.
It's been getting worse every year, is it?
Well, I've not been here for years and years,
But
yes,
crowd,
yes.
The word is, Dudley says, we've been found.
We've been found.
You know, what are we
Yes,
gonna
I
do
think the
about it?
past 3 to 4 years is what I've heard from my staff as to when they've noticed the significant difference.
No easy answers.
Yeah. Well, we will look into those suggestions and let you know what we think would definitely be feasible for having a proactive instead of reactive take.
We talked
on
about
the
putting the
situation.
digital sign up there, and I was very much against that to begin with. I think knowing that it's back off the road, I thought somebody would ride by and shoot it. And
Run
that's-
into it.
Well, but if it's back in the park, I don't think that's as much an issue. And, you know, if we need, I mean, I know there are issues about it running the park setting, but those are things you can change, and if the parking lot's closed, it's closed, but I have concerns about that, because if somebody's rented a shelter and it's closed, what are they gonna do? I
And,
mean,
yeah, that's an issue too.
I
Yeah.
don't think there's any substitute, as Jason says, for somebody there. I just don't think so. No easy answers. I worked in the park for many years at Old Rag. I fought this every Saturday and Sunday for 5 years. And if you've noticed, they've gone to a permit-only system
Oh,
for Old
okay.
Rag now.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just have to do it. Oh, yeah, it is. Is there anybody else? I'm sorry,
It's the
just a
same
minute.
issue there with the experience. Those hikers are going there, just like people going to fish or going to picnic. When it's a massive crowd, it ruins the experience. And the same thing was happening with Old Rag. So,
During the summer, Helen Morton had shared a lot of these similar frustrations, that S&P was having, you know, with users up there, and just not having adequate staff, and they were trashing the facilities, and, you know, it's a lot. I mean, I think the pandemic certainly, you know, aided this influx of visitors that we're grateful for when it comes to our business community and having that. But when it comes to, I definitely agree with Councilman Shiro, and that we do have to protect our assets here and preserve what we can offer to our community and the taxpaying residents. You know, if we were to pursue some type of a pass or an online payment option. Yeah, I mean, putting it in the water bills, but even working with the commissioner's office to get it out in the mailings for the business license for the lodging. So when they get their annual renewal for their cabins, they would have, they can be informed. I'm just thinking about ways to educate the folks here that will be sending visitors to our park. The visitor center, having Gina have her staff up there. So, I mean, it will be a process for sure,
Yeah.
but we have to start somewhere, I believe. And so, and things will break, and we'll find, oh, we didn't think about this, and we'll have to go back and revisit and evaluate. But I think, while I do agree that the signage and some of the things that's been discussed, kind of the low-hanging fruit and things we can do right now, kind of in the near future, for sure, I believe we'll take care of some of the problem perhaps, but I think that waiting a year to really evaluate user or access fees might not be in our best interest.
Council could work the admission booth on the weekends.
And we could take turns.
Less than $1.
That would be fantastic.
Oh, what a-
Can I pencil you in for a date?
Let me see.
July 4th, fantastic.
I could hand out emery boards and stuff I got left over. No, I mean, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I apologize, Mayor. I feel like I've spoke a lot while she's been at the podium, but I do want to say, it is important. You mentioned about the 60 hours with your staff, and that's the last thing that we want, right, is for our staff to be overworked, and that affects the morale and retention of staff. I'll say that I've been out walking many mornings at 7, just after 7, and I see Jen going up to the office, and I know that she's working weekends. My daughter, for those who might not know, worked in her department last year, and I know she worked a lot of weekends and was up there 5 days a week. And so I appreciate your leadership and the work that you and your staff do. But don't get discouraged. And again, we appreciate you bringing this back to us.
Thank
So
you.
do I understand then, you, in your request for the ARPA funds is where we can expect to see for the signage and the security?
Yes, and I think in the early estimates for ARPA, the security cameras were in there. The sign estimate is what I'm currently working on. I have 2 quotes back so far, and just to let you know that it also includes signage for Ralph Dean Park, because we're having the similar issues, incorrect, improper signage at that location too, mostly for the lake, but also when we were pricing signs, we felt it in our best interest to go ahead and do a design that looked consistent, so that when you enter the park, you recognize it as one of our rules or regulations or directional signs, or don't park here, or don't do this. So, so I am working on finalizing
So the
those
weekend,
estimates too.
the staff on the weekends, are they, do we just use the overtime to compensate the staff on the weekends, and they work their regular hours during the week?
Yes, sir. So typically our maintenance staff works their 40, depending on ball tournament schedules, will work late into Friday nights and Saturday nights as well. They come in after Saturday tournaments to prepare the fields for Sundays if needed. And then special events, they obviously help us with that as well.
So just a thought, I don't know, Steve or Stephen, if some of your staff is getting burnt out, even though it's the overtime, would some of the public works crews be interested in the overtime to assist on weekends or something like that?
And Jen does offer some flexible schedules when it's
Yeah. Mhm.
available. I know that if they are working that week and they'd rather take a day off during the week. So we are, again, I don't want to give the impression that Jen is the taskmaster and all of her people are worked.
I think they feel that way, Steve. I think they feel that way.
Would it be good to get a sense of how much overtime we're talking over the course of a year too, because it might make some of these decisions we're talking about a lot easier.
Sure. Well, we are mindful of our overtime budget. We are mindful of that. And Mary and now Danielle will keep us on track with that. Our staff know that when we have exhausted overtime, then they will take comp time. We have some that prefer comp time. New hires like to use comp time because they don't have a good reserve of leave. All staff are mindful of that. not to abuse it because they know that it is a finite amount. And once we reach that point, we're done.
And the
So,
full-time staff that she's talking about with the overtime, that's primarily at Dean Park for the field maintenance. And that's part of the reason that that Jen has been developing these field maintenance agreements and updating them so that we try and work with the repetitive users so that they take on more of the field maintenance for their events to reduce the amount of time that her staff are out.
Is that most of the term? I'm sorry, Joey, go ahead.
Is after 5 p.m. or before 8 a.m. and weekends automatically time and a half, or not?
For full-time staff? can-
For
Yes.
for all Parks and Rec, is that the case?
For Parks and Recreation, it would be anything,
Oh,
before
for-
7 or after 4. The regular
Before
staff
7
is
or after 4 would automatically be time and a half. Just
Unless they opt for compensatory time.
which should still be time and a half compensatory.
We do, I will say that we do have quite a few who like to, sort of split their time between comp time and overtime. We have some that prefer to take a little bit of extra time off, in the slower months in October, November. They like to take a little bit of extra time for whatever reasons, so they do like to split that. And it's not all necessarily overtime, which does help Jen's budget significantly.
Well, the reason I'm asking is because it compounds itself. If when someone may have worked 20 hours during the day, but then they work 15 hours on the weekend, they've now worked 42 and a half hours according to that system, right? Even though they've worked less than 40 hours. So it compounds itself. So as we're looking at different employees, I don't know if it's something where you can find a very well-paid part-timer that's always going to be PM, it's always going to be outside of normal hours. But you would have the flexibility to pay them pretty darn well to avoid.
Jen had tried
time and a
to
half.
do that last year with the part-time person at the beach, but again, unfortunately, his schedule, once she had hired him, and we started getting into the season, it didn't work out, and at that point, it was hard to find someone for that position. I think she is gonna, well, part of the discussion, your next discussion will be how Jen would like to provide staffing.
yeah, we typically will work to 40, and once we reach 40, then we hit overtime hours. So, like Steve said, we're flexible with schedules. If someone says, "Hey, I have a dentist appointment Friday afternoon," but or they end up working extra, then they'll work an hour less. So we work with staff. I mean, it just to make that work. But typically, our overtime doesn't.
You don't kick
doesn't
in until
really
40 hours.
Start
typically,
until
instead
40.
of doing the. Okay. Because that's one department in particular where that would be
Yes.
a nightmare for you to manage.
Oh, we work odd out, yes, yeah, we work odd hours. In fact, we have a gate opening at 6 in the morning, and then when we hit our summer hours, the gates won't close until 9. So, just as a reminder, we have people that do that. So if it's your month for gates, then you know that you have to, on the weekends, you're up and you're up late. And so, but I just want to, I always take every opportunity I can to give a plug to my staff. Something that I hope that council would understand is that these folks are vested in the town, and they go the extra mile. Never have I asked for them to do something that they haven't, willingly done. Now, they might have tried to pull my leg on it a little bit, or joke around about it, but they've always been really good, and their goal is to do their jobs well and to represent the town well and to give a great park visitor experience. So I can't speak highly enough of them. I really appreciate their efforts. They do a fantastic job.
What is total staff?
What's that?
What is total full-time staff?
There's 7 of us, including myself.
Council, anybody else before we move on from Lake Arrowhead? Are we still putting the sign over at Dean? Is that progressing? Are we supposed to put one of our digital signs over at Dean?
Yes. I am not sure of the status on that. Brian, have you talked to RJ as to when that? Okay.
Is Harvey got to run the electric first?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Our electrician has the materials for that. Yeah.
Okay. All right, anybody else? I think you're still up, Jen, is that right?
I am.
Nope.
I'm sorry. I will try to keep this one
Would you like a
short,
water?
okay?
You okay?
I'm okay. If I hit the floor, somebody pick me up, though. No. Yeah, so the next topic is really, obviously in our budget request, we have requested the addition of 2 park maintenance positions. And in an effort to take a look at department efficiency and how we go about daily tasks and projects, I really think in our best interest, a reorganization of sorts to give a specialization area for athletics and events. We currently have the equipment operator position in place. And the third leg of those main components would be grounds and maintenance, sort of a facilities operation position. So in your packet, I think you saw the draft summary of this, obviously the flow chart, and I have some clarification to make on that, as well as I couldn't get the lines to line up perfectly. But there's basically just a draft of our department organizational positions, what the primary job duties would be, and within a number of these positions would be a career development program, so to speak, with various labels being obtained given years of service and various levels of certification. I think it's really important that our staff have something to aspire to that's obtainable. I know that some of our salary ranges look really nice on the top end, but folks never see that. I mean, I don't know what our combined experience in service years is for our staff, but most of our staff have well over 10 years of experience. Their skill set is highly underutilized when it comes to implementation. So within these 3 focused areas, I'm not asking them to handle those tasks. I'm asking them to help us facilitate the implementation of that. So, if we have any events coming up, or perhaps we're trying to work on correspondence with our tournament advisors in Little League and county rec leagues and youth football, that we have a staff member that could handle a lot of the correspondence. It helps make my job a lot more efficient, where I could focus on the planning and the management aspect as opposed to spending 5 hours a day on correspondence. Likewise, with the equipment operator, we hired that position this past year, and it has been a tremendous asset to our department. No longer do I have to think about regularly scheduling oil changes and state inspections and calling for equipment rentals and repairs and handling our inventory. I have a staff person that is helping me think through and implementing those things. It's worked out fantastic, to be honest. That's full-time, yes, one of our full-time positions. Well, we're awarded that position. And likewise, under grounds and maintenance, maybe a facility staff to help do just routine park checks and maybe help oversee the landscape crew. What projects do we have going on? What signs need to be replaced? Just to help the workflow go a little bit better. As it stands now, I kind of feel like we're all in a blender and we're moving around and we're trying our best, and everybody has their hand in everything. I think when you're most efficient is when you get to kind of focus on what you do really well. And we have some staff that have been here that have tremendous background in some of these things. So my proposal for this reorganization was just to promote those staff from within, just like we did the equipment operator, if that was something they were interested in. In my request for 2 full-time park staff, that would be for the parks maintenance staff. That is currently where we are now. So, eventually, hopefully, where we could work to would be six positions underneath our crew leader. Now, just to clarify, where the flow chart goes wrong is the fact that it looks like there's park maintenance and specific seasonal staff underneath those specialty areas. We will still need to work as a team, and everybody mows and everybody does bathrooms and everybody does trash. So based on what projects we have going on or what's coming up at the end of the week, we would work together under obviously our direction and the crew leader to determine how to disperse our seasonal staff and our parks maintenance staff to make sure that we're meeting those deadlines. We unfortunately lost a couple seasonal staff early last year, and we struggle to just mow and trim. So, I will not go into reading all of this. It's there. We need additional staffing just to kind of maintain where we are. And then when you think about expansion of the Greenway, that adds another element to that.
And again, we're not looking for y'all to approve this. This was part of her, of the Park and Rec budget. We will try and fund as much as we can. The previous discussion was identifying that there is a need for additional staffing. And again, if we are proceeding with an extension of the Greenway, if we are talking about a future additional trailhead park, there will be further demands put on Jen and her staff in the current year and in the upcoming years. So again, we simply wanted to let Jen get in front of y'all and let you know that this is where is the need that she sees for staffing in the Parks and Rec department.
And just to clarify, for estimated cost budgeting purposes, the salaries for new staffing would be $56,000. That would be for 2 positions.
Is that fully loaded?
Fully funded?
No,
Benefits?
not benefits, no.
That's
56
salary
for two
only.
or each?
No,
Sure would.
no,
That's
it's
just
fi-
base salaries.
Yeah, that's just base salaries. That includes both of them.
Two. So
That's for 2.
two.
Yeah. And then the addition of the kind of specialized positions in total would be $4,868 if we were to promote from within for that.
Are you fully staffed now, Jen?
Yes, we are. Yes.
Thank you, council.
Good presentation, thank you.
Very nice.
Thank you.
Jen.
Thanks, Jen.
I appreciate your time.
Oh, that was a
All
tough
right, Danielle, you're up.
That was a tough act to follow.
You can do it.
So, Steve had asked that I discuss some of our various revenue sources coming up for the 22-23 budget cycle. And I did want to first just thank you for your patience. This is my first full budget cycle. So in the past, Brian and I have worked a lot on water and sewer rates and forecasting those changes. But full cycle, this will be my first one, so thanks for your patience. Like I said, Steve had asked that I discuss our various revenue sources. So, and I do want to preface this by saying that I understand it is difficult to look at our revenues and look at our proposed rates without seeing the expense side. But I think we've heard this evening and we've heard in the past couple of meetings that we are looking at adding some staffing and so forth, which will definitely cause us to look at those things. But please know we are steadily working on the expense side. We're still waiting on our VRS rates and our health insurance rates. So I'm hesitant to plug all those salary numbers in just yet until we have those final components. But just looking at our general fund, as you know, the real property taxes do make up a significant portion of the general fund. We would also be looking at meals tax, highway funds, personal property taxes, the business license tax, transient occupancy tax, and waste collection fee revenue. Certainly, ARPA funds for fiscal year '21 were a big source of revenue. Those were unbudgeted, so those are not included. And in fact, we've created a separate fund accounting system for them, just to keep those out of the general water and sewer funds. So you can go into the next slide, Steve. So obviously, looking at our water and sewer revenues, as you know, really our only big source of revenue there is water and sewer customer sales. We do have a significant amount of money from facility fees, and of course, as you know, that just depends on the year and what we have going on in terms of construction. Hopefully that will continue on the path we're on, and we'll see those revenues recognized as well. I did want to mention that I had a really good conversation today with the town of Stanley regarding their remote meter reading system. And I did speak with Leon at length about that, and he was really just really impressed with the overall functionality, the time savings, and all of that. And it's not a sales pitch for the remote meter reading system, but he did mention that in all, they can read about 1,500 meters in about an hour and a half, which for us equates to about, Daniel, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's about a week's worth of labor times 2 employees, correct? So he estimated that with our system being about 2,500 meters, we could do that in max of 4 hours, which is really exciting if you're thinking about terms of labor savings, or maybe filling in, assisting with other departments that may be overwhelmed. You know, we could look at that. But overall, he did mention that the data is more secure. If you have someone physically going out and reading the meters and entering that data, as we know, anything could be entered. It's not as secure. And he did mention that with the coming increases in minimum wage, that was going to be a factor for them as well, because I believe the staff reading meters for Stanley was falling under that minimum wage. So definitely a lot of factors to consider, and I do believe they're well worth the value. So something to look at moving forward for water and sewer sales, because I do believe we'll get definitely more accurate readings for our billing. Moving along to real estate, of course, that's always a heavy topic. Basically, if you recall, last May 2021, we were forced to lower the real estate rate due to the increase in assessment values. The reassessment did cause, I guess, more rigorous requirements for advertising, which we were not able to meet. At the May 10th, 21 meeting of council, you guys have voted to accept the rate of .267 in order to equalize the revenue, so that the rate would not exceed more than 101% of the town's previous rate of 29 cents as applied to the prior year assessment. It is my understanding that we did not meet those advertising requirements at the time, because that would have delayed us processing the bills. And then in that case, we would have had to extend the deadline, possibly forcing us into the next fiscal year, which would have been detrimental to our revenue for that year. We have spoken with Jason Botkins, and if we would want to consider a rate, I don't say a rate increase, I really say a rate restoration to the 29 cents, we definitely still have plenty of time for those public hearing requirements. With that being said, I would like to go ahead, I'm not asking for a decision this evening, but I would like your blessing to go ahead and consider advertising for that increase. As you can see, we have been at 29 cents since 2015. So coming down from that in 2021 to the .267 really was just due to that reassessment. So I really would like to see us restore that. If you'll look there to the right, you'll see the effect on the average household bill. So basically, if we look at a median household value of $265.5, increasing that rate to 29 cents, or actually restoring that rate to 29 cents, would actually result in an annual impact of about $61. If we would look at a higher end home value of $399, the annual impact would be $91.77. And looking at a lower value of 125.8, the annual impact would be about $29 or $14 per half. So when we do talk about increasing the rates in terms of how much that is per 100,000 of home value and so forth, don't panic, because we are looking at it in terms of all ends of the spectrum for home values, and considering what that would be per half for the effect on the homeowner. So those are just some considerations I think we need to look at moving forward. Steve and I have discussed it today. We would like to go ahead and proceed with advertising for that public hearing. We certainly don't have to make a decision, but I would hate for us to be in a situation that we were in previous years where we've run out of time. We certainly don't have to increase the rate, but it's nice to have that option available. So I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that, but certainly something to consider moving forward.
When does that ad have to go out?
I'm sorry.
When does that ad have to be?
So typically, I believe we have the 2-week publication, correct? And then 7-day public hearing requirement. Is that 30 days? Okay.
We would, honestly, there would be it would be helpful, we have to do that public hearing in April.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes.
if council is amenable to advertising and considering it, then we need to seek consensus tonight. Again, it's not committing any change to the real
Right.
estate, it's simply advertising for public input.
At 29.
To
Right.
restore it.
Correct. So, moving on to personal property values, we have received notification from Rebecca Smith, Commissioner of the Revenue, that vehicle values are trending upward. In fact, the trend upward is about 30%. As we all know, used car values have seen a very large increase and definitely increased demand during the pandemic. Typically, we would see a decrease on these values. We all look forward to watching our vehicles decrease in value and that tax bill coming down a little bit annually. But as we all know, those values have gone up drastically. So with that being said, we do currently have one rate that covers all personal property. There is currently legislation that would allow the locality to separate the tax rate for the motor vehicle class only. And like I said, currently we have one rate that covers all personal property, which would include your business tools, machinery, and equipment, and so forth. We will continue to stay informed from the Commissioner's office, and they are hoping to give us the NADA values no later than mid-March, so that we consider this as part of our budget discussions. Some localities may choose to consider lowering their personal property rate due to that increase, but I did speak with Stanley and Shenandoah both today, and they have they really have no plans to decrease that in the near future. So I think they intend to keep that the same, and most folks do know that those values are rising slightly. So, and if you look, these proposed values, I did base this on 20%, a 20% increase. Most likely not all values will increase the full 30%. You'll have some older model vehicles, I think, that will just stay stay at that. So we could see as much as about a $35,000 increase in personal property revenue just based on the NADA vehicle values.
And all the personal property in town is 49 million? Is that what that is?
Yes.
A lot of stuff, Luray.
Well, just keep in mind that does include all the vehicles. It also includes your let's see, machinery, business tools, computer equipment, heavy equipment.
I would just want to never know where to start.
Yeah.
What's the total value of all the real estate? Do you know if that number is?
I don't have that in front of me right now, but
okay, I was just curious.
yeah. So the vehicle category, that does just include vehicles, trailers, trucks, motorhomes, motorcycles, and tractor trailers. So that, you can see, if you go on to the next slide, Steve, you can see how huge that component is compared to total personal property. Sorry, the blue and the purple is a little hard to see there, but you can see that that does make up a big part of it. But like you said, the other portion is pretty significant as well. So, okay. So, moving along, meals and lodging tax. I did want to just illustrate to you the current number of establishments that we have subject to meals tax right now is about 49. Keep in mind that some of those businesses may close seasonally, so they would not report for the entire year. The average monthly meals tax payment per establishment comes to about $1,611. And the total calendar year revenue for 2021 was around $837,000. The number of establishments that are subject to paying lodging tax right now is 25. Again, a lot of those are seasonal. And right now we have 3 intermediaries that are reporting. And if you don't know what the intermediaries are, they are your VRBO, Evolve, Expedia, those types of things. So the average monthly lodging tax payment right now is about $1,115. So that's where we're at on those.
Of course, Memsland would be one account. I mean,
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
I would think we'd have a few more in town, but maybe.
Yeah. And if you guys are ever curious about a list, I can surely provide you with who those establishments are in town that are reporting. Moving
That's good
on.
information. Thank you.
Sure.
I would have never guessed that $20 million, almost $21 million in taxable meals tax in the town.
Assessment, total assessment, total retail sales,
Right,
yeah.
right, I contribute a little bit to that, but not that much.
So we can move on to the next slide, Steve. Looking at cigarette tax, I know this has come up briefly. If we look at our cigarette tax, as you all know, Councilman Webb was instrumental in implementing the cigarette tax quite a few years ago.
Made me stop smoking.
And since that time, I will say it has been a very steady source of revenue for the town. Even during the pandemic, we did not see any decrease in the sales of tax stamps. And if you look at the right side of the screen, you'll see that the neighboring localities, I feel like we're very middle of the road, perhaps even a little bit low. If we would consider just a 1% increase, Steve provided us that number of $9,000. If we would consider as much as a 5-cent increase to compare to Stanley and Elkton of 20 cents, that would bring us up to about $180,000 annually. So that's something to consider as well. If
That's the total, that's not the increase. It's the total.
Yes, that would be the new total. Our current total is about $135,000. But you'll see, even Mount Jackson is as high as 30 cents. Harrisonburg is 30 cents. So definitely that's maintained very steady over the years. So, and the county, and most of you may know, the county did recently implement their tax at 20 cents. And we were able to help them implement that. So that was a good partnership there.
Do vape shops, they don't fall
So
under the-
currently, and I don't know if Bo can lend any insight on this, but currently we are only taxing cigarettes, or I want to say this properly, smokable tobacco. We do not. Correct. No cigars, but no like chewing tobacco or anything like no vape products or anything like that. So that, yeah.
That's a.
Have you had any more research on that?
I'm looking into, I know there's things that we require, we can and cannot do. So.
Potentially. Okay. Lastly, we'll move on to the last slide. I know this has probably gone longer than you guys wanted, but lastly, Steve has prepared for us a comparison of general fund revenues in comparison to other localities for you guys to reference. And if you have any questions on this one, I'll be happy to defer to Steve. But if you have any other questions in general, I'm happy to answer those as well. One thing I will say, we have been working steadily on utility disconnects today, so we didn't get as far as we had hoped on the water and sewer data. But we will be working on, Danielle's working on gathering our query data for water and sewer usage so that then we can build those forecast files and work with Brian on our proposed water and sewer rates for you for next time. So we'll be getting on those pretty quick. But I'm happy to answer any other questions you have. Like I said, I know, we're anxious to get these numbers in and see where everything shakes out between revenues and expenses. But I wanted you to have all those considerations moving forward. So
Good information. Just an observation. If you look, we were talking about our property rates compared to some of the other jurisdictions. And if you look at what 1 penny generates in those other jurisdictions versus what it generates in the rate, that's kind of revealing as to why ours.
Right.
And Councilman Webb, the total real estate value is about 480 million. It's 476 million, but that's the total valuation of all property in town limits.
This is good. I appreciate this. Is really,
It's,
really
yeah,
good.
really helpful.
Sure.
All right, council, any comments, any thoughts?
When we're talking about this advertising of a rate increase, is that specific to real estate or is it general?
Well,
Any
the
advertising?
only requirement, schedule requirement in April is the real estate. If council would consider an adjustment to the cigarette tax or any other tax like that, we can include that in the advertisement for a public hearing in April. But as far as the utility rates, things of that nature, we would just include that as part of the budget overall public hearing that you would have.
I mean, in my opinion, it's the same thing we discussed somewhat at the retreat, but at .267 per hundred compared to other surrounding areas, I realize that our assessments may be a little low, but not to the point where we're half. I mean, our .267 is nearly double most of the others around us, with the exception of Stanley. Looking at going to a .29. I'm going to be honest. My feelings, I love what we just saw with cigarette tax. It makes sense. I think we need to get creative when we look at this. When we put the chart up and we see meals tax and we see real estate tax, which are the big revenue generators, to just focus on those two, which that's the easy part, I think, where a penny here or a percent there makes a huge difference. But if we look at more than just that, the other thing I'm thinking too, when we look at personal property, as Danielle was saying, the one thing I like about that I'm struggling on the real estate side for the people those that have a home and are struggling don't have options with that. When we're talking about cigarette tax and we're talking about personal property tax, we're getting into more things that are optional than the residents. That's where I'm at. We're looking at a year that we receive more revenue and more assistance as a town than are about to for the next 4 years ahead. Yet we're raising taxes. If a citizen, asks like, well, we've got $5 million coming over the next 5 years if we're raising taxes, and I understand when we're talking about infrastructures and the rules and the boundaries that we have with that money, which can't be used for certain operating costs and personnel and other things that we're experiencing. But tonight, as we talk about the lake, as we talk about creating fees, other things like that, I think we need to get creative in finding that revenue by other sources than just going to this real estate tax, or the meals tax as well, and just hitting that.
Well, and Danielle kind of discussed it. We're not truly looking at a real estate tax rate increase. We're simply looking to restore the rate that.
Which is an increase to the owner, though. I mean, it's an increase to what people will pay on the real estate tax. We're going back to where we were, but with the assessment change and now going back to the 0.29 where we were, it's gonna cost everyone who owns a home a little bit more, or land.
But part of the services that the town provides, and I completely understand, but part of the services that we provide as far as the recreation, public safety, streets and whatnot, those facilitate an increase in the property values to all of our residents. And if it were not for the state's requirement for equalization or advertising, the rate, the real estate rate most likely could have remained at 29 cents. And part of what the town does as far as investing in our community, as far as, again, public safety, parks and whatnot, we do that with the intent of raising the property rates. And the benefit to the town government is that as the property rates increase, we do realize more revenue from that tax rate. And that's part, I hate to say it, but that's part of the investment that the town makes, is to try and benefit each individual property owner, with the understanding that the town will realize some benefit in the future from that investment.
What is the 1 penny, I'm sorry to cut you off, what is the 1 penny real estate tax again?
About 47,000.
I think it's also important that we're not, and I don't think you're asking that we're agreeing to raise the rate or take the rate back to where it was. We're just asking to advertise it at that rate, so that as we go through the budget process, if we need to take it back there, we can do it. If we don't advertise it, I mean, if we advertise it at 29, doesn't mean we have to assess it at 29. But if we don't advertise it to meet these requirements, which are pretty stringent, 30 days prior to the public hearing, 2 weeks, which puts you 6 weeks out. So at least getting it advertised at that rate will give council the flexibility to take it back to 29 if we want to, as we go through the expenditures and as we review the budget. If we don't advertise it at that rate at this point in time,
Right.
we can't.
Right, we don't have that option.
We don't have that option. So we're not, when I say we, I'm not asking that we agree that we're going to take it back to 29. I'm just asking that we agree to let the staff advertise it, so we have that flexibility. We have that option during the budget process.
Well,
And-
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, and Steve, to the comments on public service and all of that, and which I think we've done well. As I look at these numbers, what are public safety, that's over $500,000 increase in the last 10 years within that, as far as expenditures, when we look at expenditures from the report. Parks and Rec, not as much, 6% in 10 years. Public Works, 32%. So these things have grown, and improvements are made, and we're blessed with great staff, great service, from our parks to our police to our Public Works. But at the end of the day, I think we also need to ask, as we look at this as a town, is, do we want the best for Luray? Yes, we do. But the reality is, we need the best that we can afford. And there's where, as I look at this trend, and I went back on past budget reports here too, and I'm looking how Luray's expenditures are growing, and we're doing good stuff with it. I'm not saying that, and we're providing great services with it. But at the end of the day, the best we can be is what the citizens can afford for Luray to be. And I understand with moving forward on advertising the rate, or advertising that to where we have that option. I'm just saying here tonight that I'm concerned with some of our residents and continuing to put the burden there. I hope we can find other ways to still meet Jen's needs, to meet Bo's needs, these positions and other stuff that they need to operate. Gas, are saying maybe $4 a gallon here in a very short while. So all of those things affect us, I agree, but I think we need to get creative and not take the easy route of hitting real estate.
And one thing that Danielle didn't bring up to y'all, for our senior residents, there is a program that they can exempt some of their real estate. Part of what we don't know every year is how many people will make that leap from 64 to 65 where they can qualify, and then the town will lose a portion of the real estate that we collect. And we have we have a limited ability to predict where we're going, but we do have the understanding that we are reaching the point where the boomers, every year there's more and more.
Census data is showing
That we're
an
getting,
aging
yes, so,
town.
yes, sir.
Yes.
So there's that, again, there's that concern from staff as well, is that,
That's good.
there is a concern that if we keep the status quo, the revenue that we receive will decrease just due to one of the benefits that the town does offer to our senior residents.
So if I can just rewind just a smidge. So just to echo what Councilman Shiro said, you know, what we're asking for is to have that ability. We're certainly not asking for that entire amount, but it would allow us up to that. If we were to choose to equal at 0.27, 0.28, it would give us that flexibility. And I did just want to say that, honestly, had we been able to meet those requirements last spring, I honestly feel like we would still be at 0.29 had we been able to meet those requirements. So perhaps we wouldn't even be discussing this at this point, because I think even though the assessments did increase significantly, I think we probably would have likely kept that rate the same, because as we've seen in the past, decreasing our rate is really never a good scenario. So, you know, it could be that we wouldn't even be having this debate. But I did want to mention too, my point in illustrating those home values was to let you know that I am certainly sympathetic to those who are on a fixed income. I'm sympathetic to those who may be struggling, you know, and I'm probably as conservative as they come when it comes to some of these things. But, you know, if we're looking at a lower end home value for someone who may be, you know, in a more stressful situation in terms of their funding, we are looking at $14 a half, like $14 in June and $14 in December. So I felt like it was important just to illustrate that. And then, you know, looking at the higher end home values, you know, you also have benefited from increasing home values and increasing real estate sales. So we have to look at that as well, you know, just to look at both ends. But to echo what Steve said, also, we do have our tax relief for the elderly and handicapped, and we do submit those applications to them every year. So we do have those programs to help folks out. So please don't think that we are being, you know, unsympathetic to that cause. So, but we just wanted you to have all of the information there so that you could consider that and the effect on all of those ranges.
Would you like a motion? I mean, is that what you needed, a motion?
Just consensus.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, everybody okay with that? Just advertising it? Again, it doesn't commit us to anything. right?
Correct.
Okay with that?
Yes.
Sure.
Now, as we do that, does council have, by consensus, advertising an increase in the cigarette tax? Again, it won't realize a significant amount of funding, but as you guys were asking for options.
What do we want to increase it to, Steve?
Well, to the 20 cent that's
County's 20
comparable
now.
at the county's.
20 cents for.
Take at least.
What are we,
That's
15?
right.
At least 20.
It's a-
Okay.
I mean,
It's
Yeah.
it's different, it's a different thing, as
I mean,
Jason will.
That's a
state.
position, possibly two positions of what we're, what was that, Daniel?
35.
Well,
Okay,
45 would be a single position in Parks and Rec.
It would cover a full-time
Well, was it
position
like
with
180?
benefits,
Wasn't it
fully
an increase
burdened.
at like a,
That was a total of it.
oh, what?
I think that was
Oh,
after
total.
the increase,
Oh,
wasn't it?
that's
Yeah.
That's
Maybe
total,
like a-
that's not the
Total.
increase. It's only,
Yeah.
that's why I was saying it's only like
Yeah, total.
Up there,
45,000.
I wonder what is it, okay.
It's 45,000.
Well, still,
Yeah.
it's-
Oh, yeah, we're doing it right now.
Yeah, that's, well, that's
50
salary.
Right, so basically, yeah,
Yeah.
so basically,
All right, we agreed on that, and we're gonna advertise that. All right, anybody else have anything on that? I guess we'll be looking into this further at our regular meeting, the whole budget thing?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes,
all right.
sir.
All right, anybody else have anything? Imogen, you have anything? Are you ready to go home?
Done.
Yeah, we are too.
Yeah, I should add that I think Imogen did a wonderful job back there.
She did, yeah.
Very big girl.
Yes. Bo, you did a good job. All right, get serious. Anybody else have anything? Thank you all. I know it's been a long evening, but we got a lot of, good evening. We got a lot of things we talked about, we had to talk about. So thank you all for coming, and I guess happy, is today President's Day, or it's actually
yesterday.
today, huh?
That was
It's the 22nd, isn't it?
Today's the
20th.
today's the Tuesday thing of 2/2/2/2.
Yeah, but I thought today was actual, I thought we celebrated
holiday.
yesterday. Huh? Is it?
Yesterday.
Yesterday?
Yesterday. I know every day's a holiday.
Well, it is.
Life's good for him.
It's today. No wonder people look at me funny when I tell them Happy President's Day today.
We adjourned.
Yeah.
He's got a,
You
he's
gonna
got a
adjourn the
gavel.
Oh.
Is he adjourned?
I'm not ready to go home, am I? We're adjourned.